Oh, you're already getting scared? Edwin's mocking voice reached Austin from the side. You're the one that's getting scared. Do you think that I'm like you? Although he was scared that Jack would win the bet, there was no way that he was going to show any weakness in front of Edwin. He had always been trying to compete against Edwin's safety enforcers. He would always try to get the best fighters here, so that his company could have stronger employees. The stronger the bodyguards, the higher the price the client had to pay. Although he had heard that Edwin had already sold his security company, there was no way that he could stop competing. In any case, he was the one that had lost most of the times that he had been competing with Edwin. If he could win against him even after he changed the industry that he engaged in, Austin would surely have something to brag about. The competition went on as the fighters participated. At first, there were a total of 182 fighters. The top 3 didn't participate in the preliminaries. The remaining 179 fighters would face each other in a one-on-one fight. Since it was an odd number, there would be 2 fighters for each round. In the end, the last person that would be lucky not to be randomly selected to fight in the first round would enter the second round directly. Again, this would bring a total of 90 fighters in the second round. After the end of the second round, there would be 45 fighters remaining. And just like in the first round, there would be someone that would be lucky to directly enter the next round. The same will happen for the following rounds till there are only 5 people remaining. These 5 with the top 3 would be able to enter the quarterfinals. But at the end of it all, during the quarterfinals, only the second runner-up would participate. As for the previous champion and his runner-up, they would participate in the semifinals. In other words, every month, there are only 2 spots available for others to try winning the championship. As long as one was able to maintain the second position, he would be able to reach the semifinals by default. During Jack's third match, the results were just like the previous one. As a result, as he was going back to the locker room, he met with the manager of the arena, Calvin. He was then told that he could skip all the remaining matches and enter the semifinals directly. Before giving the answer, Jack asked, Angel, does skipping the preliminaries affect the essence of the competition? Not at all. If this was any other competition and there were no those that had the advantage of skipping matches, you skipping a few matches would affect the competition evaluation by the system. But since the competition allows it, there's no problem at all. It was only after Jack heard these words that he agreed with Calvin. He certainly wouldn't want anything that would affect the results and reason for him participating in the competition. He was here to win the championship for the system mission as well as FSP, the fly swatting plan. Well, the FSP came in between, but that didn't affect Jack at all, as at the end of the day, he was here to win the match to complete the system's task. After confirming that there was no need for him to waste time on those lower-ranked people, Jack went towards the locker room. After changing his clothes, he went to the area that was confiscating his phone and took it back. Then, he headed to the VIP room where Edwin was. Although he wasn't interested in watching the other matches and wanted to take his leave, it wouldn't be good if he simply left without telling Edwin. The moment that he entered the room, several eyes landed on him. Since Jack was wearing a mask on his face while in the ring, there were only a few who could recognize him or guess his identity in the room. Hey kid, what are you doing here? A man with black shades asked as he glanced at Jack. Looking at the man, Jack couldn't help but wonder if this person's eyes were so good. Or maybe he had some kind of eye disability that would get worse as long as the eyes were exposed to light? Jack wasn't sure about it. But all the same, the fact remained to be that, in the underground arena, although it was lit, why would someone wear shades in an area that was only illuminated by bulbs? Besides, it was not like the lights that illuminated the ring were reflected to the VIP room. Anyway, Jack threw the questions out of his mind as that didn't concern him. As for the question that this guy had asked, Jack simply ignored it and headed towards where Edwin was seated. It seemed that Edwin hadn't noticed his presence the moment that he entered, as Jack could see that he was chatting with Linus. Jack had met with Linus during the registration period. He was the one that had helped in arranging the bet between Jack and Austin. Kid, I'm talking to you, and you dare to ignore me? How dare you? I'll have to teach you a lesson, it seems. The man with shades was infuriated the moment that Jack ignored him. One had to know that all of those present here were figures worth at least 10 million. So, it was obvious that they would have their own pride. The shades guy rushed towards Jack and blocked his path. Chill down, Cheeton, that's Silver. A lady pulled the guy with shades to the side and whispered into his ears. When he heard these words, Cheeton felt a chill coursing through his spine. But after he regained his composure, he looked at Jack and said, "So what if he's Silver? Ain't he just a lousy barbarian fighter? I can pay other fighters to beat him up." One more thing you don't know is that, when I was closer to Edwin, I overheard his conversation with Linus. He said that this Silver bought his safety enforcers. You have to know that safety enforcers is worth billions. But this Silver bought it at a go and paid everything in full. The lady whispered as her eyes sparkled as she gazed at Jack. Although she was already in her late 30s, there were always old cows that wanted young grass. Cheeton immediately shut his mouth at this moment. It just so happened that he was the poorest amongst the big bosses. Everyone here was worth at least $100 million. On the other hand, he was worth $10 million. And that was barely holding in, as currently, his company was facing some problems. If there was another obstacle, not to mention maintaining the net worth of $10 million, he would go bankrupt. It turned out that he was the one that was pulling down the rating of the bosses in the room. He was at the very bottom of the pyramid. The reason as to why he was able to sit with the big bosses here was due to his relationships. One of the big bosses here was his uncle. He was the one that had invited him over. But he had to seat closer to the door. That was the exact reason as to why he was the first to see Jack. As to why he was aggressive in front of Jack. It was just like how a snake would harass a rat after suffering from the pressure in the presence of a hawk. He tried to release the nervousness and pressure in his heart the moment that he saw Jack. Who would have thought that Jack was a big shot than the ones that had been giving him pressure? He had previously thought that he was a snake. Who would have thought that he was the rat? A rat trying to show off in front of the hawk? He shrank his neck and sat as far as possible from Jack to make sure that Jack wouldn't notice him lest Jack decided to deal with him. Nevertheless, it was simple for a billionaire to deal with a small millionaire like him. Jack had no interest in someone that didn't even know who he was. He simply ignored that guy and headed to Edwin. Now, several eyes had landed on him as they scrutinized him. They were curious about Jack. Although there were some of them that wanted to ask, they held back their curiosity upon knowing about Jack from the whispers that had already began spreading in the room. "Mr. Jack, you're already here." Edwin got onto his feet as he welcomed Jack with a warm smile on his face. Jack revealed a faint smile as he nodded. "I came to bid goodbye for now. I gotta get somewhere to rest first. Tomorrow, I'd like to visit the company," Jack stated. "Okay then. Since there are no interesting matches, I guess I will leave with you." Now that Edwin had sold the security company, he didn't need to pull in the fighters. That was something that he would leave to Jack. So, Jack left with Edwin and Linus under the gazes of the bosses and Austin, who till this moment had his fists clenched. It was already 10 in the night when Jack got a room to stay in. It was inside a 5-star hotel called Cheetah. Jack had checked into a presidential suite, and it cost him a total $63,000 a night. Just like always, there was income that came from the daily sales of the grocery department. Although the money that is earned from the sales weren't sent to his account, at the end of the day, it is still multiplied by the system. After the money is multiplied by 100 times, the system would leave the original amount that was earned in the grocery department accounts. As for the balance of the multiplied, it is all sent to his current account. Flyer's bank savings account balance is $5,124,324,890. This was his current balance after paying the cost of staying in the suite for a whole week. Jack wanted to use this week to stabilize things here and expand if possible. He had already taken a shower and was just looking through the posts in the internet when a pop-up notification showed that he had received a message from TM, "Text me." When he tapped it, he found that it was a text from Celine. Since they had parted the previous day, they hadn't talked again. Now that she texted him, he remembered that he could at least pass his time chatting before sleeping. It won't be bad to create his mood for sleeping by chatting with a beautiful lady. Celine: "Hello there. You sleep yet?" Jack: "Hello. I've yet to sleep. But it seems that I won't have a chance to sleep." Celine: "You're busy with something?" Jack: "Yeah, I'm busy chatting with a beautiful lady." After Jack replied, there was no reply for about a minute before a reply came through. Celine: "You sure know how to tease girls." Jack: You're the only girl that I've ever teased. Back in Inchoate City, inside her room in the presidential suite in Glaze Hotel, Celine blushed the moment that she read the reply that Jack had sent. Is he trying to tell me something? She asked herself. A smile subconsciously appeared on her face as she typed a reply. Celine, well, that's what all men say. Seeing this reply, Jack raised his brows. Well, I'm telling the truth. Anyway, it doesn't matter if they all say the same thing like I do. He then typed a reply. Jack, you should know that I'm not all men. I'm me. Celine chuckled upon the reply as she thought, surely men don't lack a reply for every question. Then, she thought for a moment before replying. Celine, anyway, I was busy today and that I didn't visit your office. Grace told me that you two have met. What do you think of her? Upon seeing that she had changed the topic, Jack moved with the flow. Jack, from her academic qualifications and experience, she's good. As for the performance, that would need at least a week for the evaluation to begin. Celine, I'm happy that you're satisfied with her for now. Oh, why is it that you're going to start evaluating her within just a week? Jack, I think that a week should be enough for me to start seeing the changes. The grocery department is one that has sales on a daily basis. So, even if there's only a minimal change, it is a change nevertheless. So, it would only depend on whether or is a positive or negative one. Celine had to agree with Jack on this. If he was thinking about seeing bigger positive changes within a week, he would need a large amount of capital. But upon seeing that Jack didn't seem to be looking forward to bigger changes, she nodded. Sometimes, it was good to take things slowly. If Jack had known about her thoughts, he would have simply laughed it off and said, capital? A whole billion to boost the services, sales, and other things in the department. That was enough to ensure that there were bigger changes within just a few days, as long as the one that was handling things was decisive enough. Celine, it's good that things are okay. Jack, how are you doing on your part? Considered moving to the building yet? Celine thought for a moment and made a decision. Celine, in the future, if the company grows, I'll tell my friend to move it there. Currently, it's still small and there's no need for the whole floor. The building that we're occupying currently isn't bad. Seeing that Celine didn't seem to want to move the office to the building, Jack didn't pursue that. If she wanted to do that, she would. But now that she seemed to be having plans of her own, Jack wouldn't interrupt them. Jack, you're welcome at any time. I'll reserve a floor for you, as long as you tell me the number that you would like to occupy. Celine, okay. You free tomorrow? I would like your help with something. At this moment, Celine was thinking about dealing with something in Inchoate City. Jack seemed to have formed a bond with the youngsters of Inchoate City. On the other hand, although her family was strong, it was mainly based in the capital. No matter how strong they were, their influence in Inchoate City was small, and she was bound to face some problems. Jack, that's going to be a problem for now, as I'm in Venture City at the moment. Celine was surprised the moment that she found out that Jack was no longer in Inchoate City. She wondered if he had an emergency or had some business to do in Venture City. Although she didn't ask what he was doing there, she felt a little disappointed that he didn't inform her before leaving. When she noticed that her mood seemed to have dropped, she couldn't help but be surprised at herself. What's up with me? Why is it that I wanted him to tell me when he was leaving? It's not like we're that much familiar for him to tell things like that. Celine, okay then, I won't disturb you. Good night. Jack was stunned the moment that he saw the reply. What's up with her? Does she think that I don't want to help her and she's angry with me? Jack's heart tightened for a moment before he typed. He could see that she had yet to go offline. So, he was sure that she would see the text. Jack, wait a moment. What trouble are you facing? Maybe I can help you even if I'm not there. Celine was just about to exit the app when she saw Jack's text. She hesitated for a moment before reading it. She had wanted to end the conversation at this moment because she had started feeling uneasy. It was as if something that was hers was about to get snatched from her grasp. She didn't understand what was the reason behind this. But, at the end of it all, she just decided to stop chatting with Jack and calm herself down for a moment as at this time, there were several questions that were running in her mind. What are you doing there? Is there a girl that you're seeing? Or do you already have a girlfriend? These questions were ringing in her mind again, and she was getting an impulse to ask. She was afraid that if she didn't stop now, she would end up asking such a question. And considering that they were just getting to know each other, Jack might feel that she was invading his personal issues. This might as well result in the relationship that they were having now to collapse. After reading it for a moment, she replied, "Celine, there are some gangsters that seem to be loitering around the building that the company is located. From the way that they are behaving, I can see that their target is the company. I'm not sure why they're targeting the company or me, but at the end of the day, they are a danger that might as well erupt in the next moment. What's more is that, since my connections here are shallow, I can't find who sent them there. I can't call the police as long as they don't do something that breaks the law." Celine was really exasperated at the moment. The moment that she began typing, she suddenly felt like she could tell Jack all that was in her mind at the moment. At this moment, she suddenly forgot about the impulses as she laid out the troubles in her heart. The moment that Jack read the words gangsters, he immediately felt something wasn't right. The moment that he found out that they seemed to be targeting Celine, instinctive anger began welling inside his heart, and he almost got out of the suite to fly back to Inchoate to deal with the mastermind. It was only after a moment of taking a deep breath that Jack was finally able to keep his calm. He still had a mission to complete and a bet to win. There was still a company that he still needed to make changes to. "Jack, can you make it possible for them not to attack during this week? I'll be there at the end of this week or earlier to deal with them for you." Although Celine couldn't hear his words and could only read them, she could feel the confidence in these words. This made her heart calm. But it was also at this moment that the impulses came back. She had just typed "thank you" on the screen when she suddenly added a few more words. By the time that she realized it, she had already sent the text. "Celine, thank you. I'll try to stall them for a week. If I may ask, do you have a girlfriend?" "Celine, thank you. I'll try to stall them for a week. If I may ask, do you have a girlfriend?" Throughout all of this time, Jack had never expected such a question coming from Celine. He wondered why she asked that question, or she wanted to date him. He wasn't sure about it. Anyway, there was no harm in telling her the truth. So, Jack typed the reply. "Jack, not really. Do you want to take the post?" Of course, the last question was just to tease her. Although he didn't know what his feelings towards her were, not unless he confirmed, there was no way that he would start a relationship with her. Furthermore, he could still remember the words that his mother had told him when she gave him the envelope. She had clearly stated that if he ever wanted to start a relationship, he had to open the envelope. And since he was sure that he wasn't ready yet, he hadn't opened the envelope. On the other hand, Celine, who was just berating herself for sending such a message, was both stunned and excited. She was surprised that Jack would give her such a reply without complaining about her involvement in his personal life. As for the reason of the excitement, she herself wasn't sure about it, but what she could make out of it was that she was happy that he didn't have a girlfriend at this moment. As for the question that Jack had just asked, although she had an impulse to reply yes, she knew that he was just joking. In any case, how could she become his girlfriend yet they hadn't known each other for more than a week? Although it was a week, this was the third time that they were communicating. Although they had shared some of their experience, loves and hates, it wasn't to the extent that they could say they knew each other well. "Celine, I'll pass." The duo chatted for over an hour before Jack decided to say goodnight. Because he had some other things that he had to take care of during the day, and in the evening, he would be having a fight. Although he was sure that the person that he was going to fight wasn't strong enough to give him any kind of difficulties, it was still better to be ready for anything. Early the next morning, after Jack woke up, it was only then that he realized that he had only come with a single pair of clothes. In other words, other than the suit that he was wearing the previous day, he had no other clothes to change into. Shaking his head, Jack decided to take his breakfast first before going to buy a few pairs of clothes. In the end, he was going to stay in Venture City for almost a week, and there was no way that he was going to stay in the same pair of clothes for all this while. It didn't take long for Jack to reach a mall that sold the clothes. It was called Campin Mall, a leading mall in Venture City. With him wearing a suit, he didn't encounter any snobbish salesperson. After buying a few pairs of clothes, just so as to make it movements in the city convenient, he decided to buy a car. Of course, he already had enough luxury. What he wanted currently was something that could help him in moving around. He simply bought a Mercedes-Benz E-Class at a price of $570,000. Buying the clothes that were made from cashmere cost him $100,000. In total, his current balance was $5,123,654,890. The legal procedures of the car took about half an hour to get completed. Immediately after that, Jack went to the hotel to change. They had agreed to meet today at 10 so that Edwin could show him around the company. Jack had to know those that were in charge of the company currently, as he wasn't going to start taking care of the company himself. But if they lacked money, that was something that Jack didn't lack at the moment. In fact, he could give it a boost by investing more money to make the company become bigger. The moment that he arrived in the parking lot of the hotel, he found that there were several parking spots that had already been occupied. In other words, the parking space was almost full with a single space left. He wasn't sure why all of a sudden there were many cars here. But what he was sure about was the fact that there might be a party, a conference, or a meeting between big bosses in the hotel. He was just about to park the car when suddenly, he heard a car's honking from behind. Looking behind via the rearview mirror, Jack could see that there was a blue Lamborghini Diablo. Although it was more expensive than his Mercedes-Benz E-Class, Jack didn't think much of it. After all, he could afford it considering that it was only worth about $3 million. He had a Bugatti Veyron that was worth tens of millions of dollars. So, there was no way that he would just behave like the owner of the Lamborghini behind him was worth a lot of respect from him to the extent of giving away a parking space. So, he simply parked his car and ignored the person that was busy honking at him. Upon noticing that he'd been ignored, the other party was of course not pleased. So, the doors of the Lamborghini opened and a young man with branded clothes from Versace alighted, followed by a lady with a thick makeup. Can you get that piece of crap from my parking space? The guy shouted at Jack as he strode towards Jack aggressively. Jack ignored him and headed towards the elevator that was in the parking lot. He had no time to deal with these nouveau riches that only knew how to flaunt their parents' wealth. The guy simply ran towards Jack's car and stepped on its rear left tire while looking at Jack, who didn't seem to want to stop, as he said, "If you don't remove this piece of junk from here, I'll smash it for you." When Jack heard these words, his steps halted. He had just bought the car because he wanted something that could make it convenient for him to move around the city. Now, someone was threatening to destroy it only after he'd bought it? Although it wasn't expensive for Jack, it was time-consuming for him to go back to the shop to buy another one. There was no way that he was going to do that, as he still had other important things that he needed to handle. He looked at the guy that was already stepping on the tires of his car and said simply, "If you do that, I'm afraid I'll have to reciprocate the favor." Jack's words were clear to the ears of the duo. If they dared to smash his car, he would in turn smash theirs. At the end of the day, this guy would be the one that would suffer great losses. Ha ha ha. Did I just hear your words correctly? You can smash my car? Do you think that you can afford it? Wearing a suit makes you think that you're a big shot. The guy laughed out loudly as he looked at Jack contemptuously. The girl that had thick makeup on chuckled as she looked at Jack. She said, "Garpy, this is a country bumpkin. He definitely doesn't know his place." She then looked at Jack with disdain as she said, "Do you know how much that car costs?" Without waiting for Jack's reply, she continued, "It is worth $3 million if you add the cost of customization. Even a single scratch, I'm afraid that you won't be able to afford to repaint it." Just a few $1,000,000 was nothing in front of Jack, not to mention a few $1,000s. So, he looked at the guy called Garpy and said, "Just try it and stop wasting my time." And immediately after that, he turned around and headed towards the elevator without looking back. Garpy looked at Jack's departing back, and his expression turned gloomy. He sneered, "Since you don't believe words, I have no choice but to use actions to show you what I mean." And with that, Garpy looked around the parking lot and found a stone as big as a basketball and threw it towards the Mercedes-Benz's rear windshield. Crash! The stone that was thrown with great strength immediately made the rear windshield dome in as countless cracks were formed. Additionally, the area around the car's boot was deformed. The moment that Jack heard the sound of a glass window being broken, his eyes immediately turned cold. He turned his head and saw that Garpy had really smashed his car with a stone. Furthermore, he was taking the stone, ready to smash the car again. Looking around, Jack found a fire extinguisher. He picked it up and slowly walked towards the Lamborghini Diablo. There was no need for him to talk. Just actions were enough to prove his words. Garpy and his girl were enjoying the thrill of smashing another's car when suddenly, they heard a loud crashing sound coming from behind them. The moment that they saw what was happening, their faces paled. Garpy couldn't believe that this guy really had the guts to smash his car. He had smashed Jack's car because he thought that Jack had no background at all. Furthermore, he himself wasn't someone simple as he was from the capital. Although his family wasn't that big in the capital, in a place like Venture City, he could be said to be a force to be reckoned with. Since Venture City was closer to the central province, his family's influence was good enough for him to do almost anything. Although he had smashed Jack's car, using his family's connections, he could just pay a few $1,000s if Jack called the police. But Jack smashing his car was completely out of his expectations. With rage in his eyes, he looked at Jack as he shouted, "How dare you smash my car? Can you afford to pay for it? How dare you smash my car? Can you afford to pay for it?" Garpy's voice was loud to reach Jack's ears. But since he had destroyed his car, Jack had to return the favor. Although Garpy had only smashed the rear windshield, Jack was going to make sure that this car turned into nothing other than scrap metal that couldn't be repaired.
Bang!
Crash. Smash. Boom. With Jack's current strength, with the help of the fire extinguisher container, he easily turned the body of the Lamborghini into nothing but waste metal. Currently, it was almost flattened. On the other hand, Garpy was hopping mad. Someone had just destroyed his car that was worth millions of dollars. If he didn't make him repay that with an interest, then he wasn't Garpy at all. He took out his phone and made a call. "Hello, you guys get down here at this moment. There's a punk that doesn't know his place. We'll be there in a moment." A reply came from the other side before the call was ended. Garpy looked at Jack, who hadn't stopped even after the car's body had been flattened. He was already destroying the tires. Although Garpy could buy another car, it would surely affect the way that the family thought of him. In any case, he had only recently bought the car. If he bought another, they would think that he was misusing the money. "Punk, you're not going to get out of here. Just you wait." The girl with thick makeup shouted at Jack. She was enjoying moving around in such a cool sports car. Now that it had been destroyed, it was obvious that she could no longer enjoy it unless Garpy bought another car. Not long after Jack finished his masterpiece, a group of around 20 youths rushed out of the elevator. All of them were young men wearing branded clothes. They immediately rushed towards Jack's direction and surrounded him before they began sneering at him. "You sure have guts, kid. Do you know what you've done? We're going to make sure that you won't leave this place alive. To dare smash Garpy's new Lamborghini, I don't know if you're brave or an idiot." Jack ignored the young masters that had surrounded him. If this was before he gained the professional combatant ability, he would surely be flustered being attacked by over a dozen people at the same time. Nevertheless, at that time, although he was strong due to visiting the gym on a daily basis, there was no way that he could deal with these guys if they attacked him at the same time. But now, even if they attacked him at the same time, considering the fact that most of them had weak physiques as they didn't train at all, Jack could beat them up without a problem. So, he simply looked at the watch in his hand and saw that time was running. He still had to change his clothes before Edwin arrived. Otherwise, he would be late. Thinking of this, he decided to leave. If they dared to try stopping him, he wouldn't mind teaching these brats a good lesson. On the other hand, the elevator opened again. This time, over a dozen girls with exquisite makeup on and branded clothes rushed out. Looking at the far end of the parking lot, they saw the boys had surrounded someone, and it seemed that a fight would start at any moment. This group of youths came from the capital to have fun. They had decided to meet in Venture City before going to different other cities to enjoy the scenery. They were supposed to meet up here and plan about what they were going to do. Now, they were just about to start discussing when Garpy told them that there was a person that had caused him problems. As a group of friends, they would always stand for each other. So, they all rushed out of the suite that they had just gathered in. Since the elevator was small and it couldn't fit all of them, they decided that men would go out first before girls followed them. Amongst the girls that were heading to the scene, there was an absent-minded girl. If Steve was here, he sure would have recognized her as the girl that had gone to Alfonso family for the engagement with Jack. Currently, her thoughts were wandering around, wondering when she was going to meet Jack. She couldn't help but blush from time to time the moment that she thought about the marriage that was to occur a little over a year from now. Wendy, what's up with you today? You've been blushing since you came. Have you found a boyfriend or something? A girl with her bangs blocking her left eye asked as they walked towards the scene. Ah? Oh, what were you saying? Wendy looked at the girl, but it was obvious from her question that she had been absent-minded not long ago. Do you have a boyfriend? The girl asked with raised brows. Ah, what are you talking about? You better stop spouting nonsense. Wendy blushed as she thought of Jack. She had met with Jack before, and she happened to fall in love with him since a year ago. She could remember how it was that day. She had gone to Crystal City together with this group of friends at that time, just like what they were planning to do now. At that time, she had a problem with her stomach. As a result, she had stayed in the washroom for a long period of time, and that by the time that she came out, she found that her friends had already left. Flashback. As she was leaving the restaurant, she was just about to cross the road to the other side where her friends were, when she was pulled back and she landed into a guy's chest. The exact moment that she was pulled back, a car sped past. Had she not been pulled back in time, that car would surely have knocked her. With the speed that the car was being driven at, it would be a miracle if she managed to survive after the accident. Although she was just about to lash out at the person that had pulled her back and made her land onto his chest, she was forced to swallow her words as her body shook the moment that she felt the breeze that came with the passing of the speeding car. There was no need to ask about anything. She had just been saved from getting killed. After a few seconds, the person that had saved her held her shoulders as he pushed her back from his embrace. She raised her head and looked at his face for the first time. She noticed that well-carved face, those blue eyes, and the unique short silver hair. This guy was so handsome. You better be careful when you're crossing the road next time. And with that, he left, not waiting for her thank you, nor asking for anything in return for saving her. The thing that she noticed was that, other than his clothes that looked cheap, his figure was good. When she was on his chest, she felt his chest muscles clearly. From that moment, she had gotten smitten by him. She fell in love with him, and this love continued growing till she couldn't hold it in anymore. Since she hadn't thanked him all this while, she decided that she would marry him as a thank you. So, she asked for her grandfather's help. End of flashback. Look at your expression. It's obvious that you have a boyfriend and you're trying to hide it, aren't you? The girl with bangs asked again. You changed a lot since we went out last year. What happened to you? Your behavior has been particularly strange since yesterday, and today, it has gone a step further. The girl continued. Wendy wasn't a shy girl that she was at this moment. She was a decisive girl back then. If a person dared to tease her, she would definitely make him pay for it. But suddenly, her character changed suddenly a year ago. Now, she would sit absent-minded for a long time, revealing a smile from time to time. It was as if the previous Wendy and the current one were two different people. Wendy pulled the girl closer and whispered to her ears, Angie, you better keep what I'm telling you a secret or else I won't be your friend anymore. Look, I just got engaged 2 days ago. I'll be married when I turn 21. Angie's eyes widened in disbelief when she heard these words. She was just a shout in surprise when Wendy tightly closed her mouth using her hand. She gave her a stare and Angie was forced to swallow her scream. Upon noticing that she had calmed down, Wendy let go of her mouth. But immediately after that, Angie whispered back, How come you're engaged to someone and I know nothing about it? Sheesh, such a gossipy person. Anyway, the engagement party will be arranged once I meet him. Wendy replied with a smile. You mean that you haven't met him yet, and you're behaving in such a manner? What kind of guy is he to make you change this much? Angie couldn't help but ask. Wendy was just about to reply when they arrived at the scene. She could see that at the center of over 15 youths, there was a young man with blue eyes, silver hair, and a handsome face. The moment that she saw him, her movements froze as she stared at the young man in a white suit, wide-eyed. Her cherry lips parted as she stared at the young man in disbelief. Angie happened to see her reaction. She couldn't help but look at the young man and size him up. Then, she looked at Wendy and said, He's just a handsome guy. What's up with that exaggerated expression on your face? The moment that she saw him, her movements froze as she stared at the young man in a white suit, wide-eyed. Her cherry lips parted as she stared at the young man in disbelief. Angie happened to see her reaction. She couldn't help but look at the young man and size him up. Then, she looked at Wendy and said, "He's just a handsome guy. What's up with that exaggerated expression on your face?" Wendy gave no reply as she stepped forward towards the encirclement. Jack had no idea about Wendy. Currently, his expression hadn't changed even a little bit when facing this large group of youths. He looked at his watch again and saw that he'd just wasted a few more minutes that he could have used in doing other things. Upon seeing this, he decided not to play with these youths any longer. He ignored their mocking expressions and began walking towards the elevator. Of course, in front of him there were a few youths. And the moment that they saw that Jack had began walking, they began approaching him with ferocious smiles. "Since you dared to smash Garpy's car, we'll have to teach you a good lesson and place you in your place. Not just that, you'll have to pay for the damage that you've caused even if you have to sell some of your organs. I just happen to know where there are people that can buy these organs. What are you all talking for? Just beat him up." "That's right. Anyway, let's play with him a little. If we attack him at the same time, it won't be fun at all. Let's just play with him and give him some hopes that he can escape. I'll go first then." One of the youths happened to have a bulky body. His height was already 1.93 m. He could be said to be the person with the biggest body amongst all the youths present. Furthermore, this youth just happened to be in the direction that Jack was heading to. So, the others didn't say a word and acknowledged that this guy was the one to make the first move. The youth moved towards Jack when the others stopped, but he frowned the moment that he noticed that Jack seemed to be heading his way. It was only a moment, as in the next second, the frown disappeared and in its place, a cold smile appeared. "Looks like you know yourself all too well. Come on over here so that I can finish this as fast as possible. I don't want to waste so much time on you." The guy spoke as he waited for Jack to get to him. The moment that Jack arrived in front of him, the guy took a fighting stance and was ready to start the brawl when something that he hadn't expected happened. Jack passed by the side, completely ignoring him. Bulky. Everyone. This stunned not only him, but the others as well. Jack simply walked away even though they were expecting that there would be a confrontation. "What are you doing, Terrence? Look, you're letting him get away." At this moment, Garpy yelled as he led the way to follow Jack. His shout was like a signal as the others came back to their senses and surrounded Jack once again. This time, Garpy and a few of his close friends didn't wait for Terrence to make a move. Instead, they immediately rushed towards Jack while brandishing their fists, ready to beat him to a pulp. They were just about to reach Jack when a shout made them stop and turn their gazes towards the origin of the voice. They then saw Wendy coming forward and stood in front of them, blocking their way to Jack, who was still walking away as if nothing had happened. "What are you doing, Wendy?" Garpy frowned as he looked at Wendy gloomily. "You can't attack him. I forbid that. If you dare to do so, you'll be my enemy from this moment onwards," Wendy stated with a serious voice. "Ha ha ha, Wendy, you're so funny. What joke are you playing here?" Garpy obviously couldn't believe that Wendy was going to protect Jack. All the same, they were a group of friends and he was sure that Wendy wouldn't go against him for a nobody. Although they weren't that much close, at least the relationship between him and Wendy was good enough for her to help him out if he was in problem. But that was as long as she wouldn't suffer any loss when helping him. "I'm serious about it. So, you make your choice." Wendy had no intention of budging at all. She was serious about protecting Jack. The other youths were confused by Wendy's move. They wondered what was going on. They couldn't understand anything at all. At this time, Angie came forward and tried pulling Wendy out of the way. "What are you doing, Wendy? Are you crazy? Just because he's handsome, you want to protect him at the cost of being enemies with Garpy?" "Angie, you don't understand at all," Wendy replied without explaining anything. Garpy, on the other hand, had a solemn expression on his face. He couldn't understand why Wendy could go all the way to protect someone that she just met because he was handsome. Thinking about his car that was currently scrap metal, he decided to ignore Wendy's warning and charge towards Jack. Currently, Jack was only about 100 meters from the elevator. Seeing that Garpy was making a move even after she had warned him, she moved fast to block him. But she couldn't compare with Garpy, who was a man, as he easily got past her. He wasn't the only one that did that, as his 4 friends also managed to get past Wendy. Upon seeing this, Wendy panicked and shouted at them, Garpy, don't you dare touch my fiancé. Her words were like an electric current that stunned everyone as everyone present in the underground parking lot stopped. Then, they all looked at Wendy with disbelief in their eyes. This guy was actually Wendy's fiancé? How? When? They couldn't understand how Jack became her fiancé. What's more, they didn't know about the engagement at all. Angie, who was holding Wendy's arm, was the most surprised of them all. She was the one that Wendy had told that she just got engaged 2 days ago. At this moment, she finally understood and couldn't help but look at Wendy incredulously. She now understood Wendy's expression when she was looking at Jack. So, it turned out that he was her fiancé. On the other hand, Jack's reaction was no different from the others. It was just that his wasn't that much exaggerated. But he too couldn't believe what he had just heard. Fiancé? Since when had he been engaged? If he remembered everything well, he had never gotten engaged. But now, there was someone that was claiming to be his fiancé. He then thought of how he had thought that there was someone that would come and claim to be his girlfriend. Back then, he only had a motorcycle that the system had rewarded him with. But now, other than the suit that he was putting on, there was nothing expensive. When looking at the Mercedes-Benz E-Class, that wasn't something that could make the girl who was obviously from a big background to claim to be his girlfriend. Wait, not girlfriend. She had even promoted herself to being his fiancée. What did that imply? That meant that he was going to marry her someday unless the engagement was annulled. Jack turned and looked at the girl with gray eyes just behind Garpy and his friends. No matter how he looked at her, he didn't have any memories of her. In other words, he had never met her before, as not only was her face unfamiliar, even her voice was unfamiliar, not to mention her figure. After failing to get anything about her in his memories, he simply shook his head and thought, maybe she got the wrong person. No, she definitely got the wrong person. But I might as well use this chance to get out of here without wasting more time on these guys. As he thought to this point, he gave Wendy one last glance before entering the elevator. The elevator closed a little while later. Wendy looked as Jack left. She was conflicted in her heart and felt bitter. The way that Jack looked at her was like that of a person meeting a stranger. She had thought that he could remember about her. Who would have thought that he didn't seem to recognize her? Although she felt bitter in her heart, she still remembered that they had only met once, and that was a year ago. Maybe he had already forgotten about the incident. On the other hand, although they were engaged, Jack wasn't there during the engagement. So, it was understandable that he wouldn't be able to recognize her. And as to why he seemed not to know about the engagement, she didn't think much of it. She simply thought that he didn't want to talk about it in front of her friends. Wendy, are you serious that he is your fiancé? Angie asked the moment that Jack disappeared into the elevator. She wasn't the only one that was curious about this, as all the others gazed at her with expressions that showed that they needed an explanation. Wendy, are you serious that he is your fiancé? Angie asked the moment that Jack disappeared into the elevator. She wasn't the only one that was curious about this, as all the others gazed at her with expressions that showed that they needed an explanation. Wendy took a deep breath. Before, she had no intention of disclosing the fact that she was now engaged. She wanted to wait till the engagement party for her to make it public. But in this current situation, it seemed that she had no choice but to talk about it. Well, we got engaged 2 days ago and we'll be married when I turn 21, Wendy said calmly. The moment that they heard these words, they couldn't help but wonder to themselves, what was Jack's background? To be able to become Wendy's fiancé, he must have a good background, right? They took a deep breath while thinking about how they were just about to attack him. None of those present here didn't know how Alton doted on Wendy. And, if he had approved of Jack being her fiancé, it was obvious that he must have capabilities as well as a good status that could match her. And, if they had beaten Jack, they would have surely faced Alton's fury. Not to mention that there was still Jack's own family. Garpy gazed at the Mercedes-Benz E-Class that he'd just smashed. He now forgot about the fact that his car had been smashed, and he was thinking about what Jack would do next. Although his family wasn't that weak as compared to Wendy's Farrell family, if Jack's family collaborated with Farrell family, his Kibbo family would surely have to face the music. He gulped at the thought of this. He looked at Wendy and said, Wendy, I'm sorry, but I didn't know that he was your fiancé. Otherwise, how could I have attacked him? Humph. Wendy simply snorted, and turned her head to the side. Seeing this, Garpy could only scratch his head. He looked at Jack's Mercedes again and decided to compensate him for it, as he had just smashed his car. Although his car was also smashed, it was his fault for smashing Jack's car first. Wendy, why didn't you say that you were engaged before? Right. If you had said that earlier and introduced your fiancé to us, we surely wouldn't have dared to cause him problems. Wendy glanced at the group and said, Now you know. You better not spread this news to the time that the engagement party is held. Yes, yes, yes. The group of youths nodded. But of course not all the youths were happy that Wendy had been engaged. Wendy was a great beauty amongst the group, and there were several guys that were trying to hit on her. But all this while, she had never refused them directly. Naturally, that was only till last year. After their trip to Crystal City, she had changed and began straightly refusing their proposals. Then, as time went on, as long as they mentioned anything about courting her, she would get angry and throw a tantrum. Amongst the group of youths that tried hitting on Wendy was a boy named Collins. He was the one with the best background amongst all of those present, and was the one that had been the most active in pursuing Wendy. His family was stronger than Wendy's. As a result, he wasn't afraid that she would cause him problems. Although she refused him several times, he had always come back again and again to propose to her. Even during this trip, he was planning on asking her out again. But who would have thought that she would get engaged? He clenched his fists tightly as he thought about Jack. He had seen that Jack didn't seem to care about Wendy, and that was the exact reason as to why he was even more angered. He simply thought that the guy and his family had forced the engagement on Wendy. So, he decided that he was going to solve this for her. If he managed to do that, he was sure that her impression of him would rise, and there would be no problem in getting her to be his woman. As he thought of this, he made plans in his mind that would be executed as soon as possible. Do you know when Celine is going to come back? Angie asked Wendy with a whisper. I don't know. Maybe we can visit her there in Crystal City. I was there yesterday, but I completely forgot about that when I was leaving with my grandpa, Wendy replied. After getting into his suite, Jack changed the clothes, and not long after, his phone rang. It was Edwin who had already arrived and was ready to take Jack to the company and show him around. Since his car was already smashed, he would have to get another one. But that would have to wait till he finished the issue about the company. He got out of the hotel, but he didn't go to the underground parking lot as there would be nothing that he would be doing there as he had no car there. Moreover, he didn't want to meet with that group of people that would only delay him further. When he got out, he found that Edwin had parked his car on the roadside, not far from the hotel. Since he had no car, he had to depend on Edwin's car. As soon as he got in, Edwin welcomed him with a warm smile. Morning, Mr. Jack. Good morning, Mr. Edwin. Jack replied with his usual shallow smile. Edwin then began driving the car while chatting with Jack. Although Edwin was rich and could have gotten himself a chauffeur, he didn't seem to mind driving the car himself. Mr. Edwin, are the youngsters in this city that rude? You know, one of them just smashed my car not long ago. After a while of chatting, Jack asked. Edwin's expression changed the moment Jack spoke. He couldn't believe that there was a person that had the guts to smash Jack's car. Upon noticing that Jack had no injuries on him, he let out a sigh of relief. It was only a moment later that he remembered that Jack wasn't a weakling. Then, he asked, Do you happen to know him? If you do, I'll make sure that they pay for that. I don't know any of them. It was a bunch of over 30 youths. As for making them pay, there's no need for you to worry about that. I simply smashed his car after he did mine. Jack replied. Edwin was surprised that Jack did destroy the other party's car. But, upon considering Jack's status, he knew that Jack seemed not to care that much about the incident, and that was the reason as to why he left it at smashing the other party's car. Otherwise, he was sure that he could make the other party disappear just depending on his strength as a fighter or as a rich person. Anyway, what did that guy do? Edwin was curious about what that guy did when Jack smashed his car. He was sure that the youth, as hot-blooded as he was, would definitely not let things be the way that they were. Well, he called his friends over, and they decided to attack me. But, before they could strike at me, a girl suddenly stopped them claiming that I'm her fiancé. This thing made me surprised. Jack chuckled a little while, thinking about how that girl had gone against all those that wanted to attack him. In the end, she said that he was her fiancé. Although Jack would have thought that she was just using an excuse to make the others not to attack him, he could clearly feel that she was serious. Furthermore, the look in her eyes spoke all words that needed to be said. Ha ha ha, I didn't know that you already have a fiancé here. So, when is the wedding? I must attend. Edwin laughed as he asked, What fiancé? I don't even have a girlfriend. I think that she confused me with someone else. Jack replied as he shrugged his shoulders. When Edwin heard this, he couldn't help but be flabbergasted. He wondered to himself, are youths this way nowadays? They play so much in that they even get confused on who their fiancé is? This generation seems to be developing negatively. He only thought to that point when he looked at Jack that was seated on the back seat through the rearview mirror. If he said what he was thinking, it would definitely be no different from insulting Jack, who was also a youth. But Jack was completely different, as he was serious with everything that he did. After chatting for a little longer, they finally arrived at the outskirts of the city. In this area, buildings were fewer in number, and there were mainly factories that were located in these areas. Jack had already known that the headquarters of the safety enforcers was located in the outskirts of the city when he read the information on the internet. The reason for that was because they needed enough space that could be used as the training grounds. The headquarters occupied an area of more than 2 square kilometers. The training grounds took most of the space. But what was even more amazing was the fact that the whole area was surrounded by a perimeter wall of height of 4 meters. At the gate, there were a few men in black security uniforms that had the logo of safety enforcers. They opened the gate the moment that they saw Edwin's familiar car. When they got in, Jack could feel the change in the atmosphere. It was as if he had just entered a soldier's training camp. Although he could only see the 5-story building in front of him, he could guess that behind this building was where the training grounds were. He alighted alongside Edwin and entered the building. Edwin had decided to introduce the management team of the company first. Jack had nothing to say and simply followed Edwin into the building. Edwin took Jack around the company and introduced him to the upper management of the company. All the management-level staff members had been told to enter the conference room, where Edwin introduced Jack as the new boss of the company. There was obviously a commotion among the staff members when they heard that Jack had taken over. They could see that Jack was young, and they obviously doubted his capabilities. It wasn't that they hated Jack, it was just that some youngsters nowadays depended on their parents' wealth to boss people around. Moreover, Jack's casual wear didn't seem to match a person that was serious about the office. Upon seeing them whispering to each other, Edwin frowned a little before throwing a glance at Jack. When he saw Jack's indifferent expression, he let out a sigh of relief before gazing back at the members of the staff. Let me tell you something. If you're taking Mr. Jack the same way that you see those nouveau riche brats that flaunt their parents' wealth, I suggest that you change that opinion of yours as soon as possible. After pausing for a moment, he continued, This company was bought over by Mr. Jack and not his family. In other words, this is going to be his business. So, I expect that you'll respect Mr. Jack just like how you did when I was your boss. And you should know that if your performance is subpar, Mr. Jack can simply fire you to get another that can do your job well. Edwin's words made the crowd of over 30 employees to shut their mouths. They looked at Jack in new light, more so those that were at the very top and knew about the value of the company. To be able to buy the company, Jack must have at least $3 billion. Although they doubted that it was Jack's money and not his family's, they still had to give him the respect considering the fact that his family could entrust to him so much money. Mr. Jack, I'm the current CEO of Safety Enforcers, Maxwell Estelle. A middle-aged man with a refined temperament stepped forward and greeted Jack. Jack nodded at the other party as they shook hands. Just from this person's temperament, Jack was expecting a lot from him. But if he really lived up to his expectations, that would definitely have to wait. After the introduction process was over, Jack looked at the data on how they had been operating the company. He found that there were several contracts that were still ongoing, and there were others that still needed processing. After going through all of these, Jack finally understood how the company was operated. From his perspective, there was nothing wrong, but he still had to do some changes. So, he asked for the company's account and transferred $1,100,654,890. He decided to believe that the person that Edwin had selected to be in charge of the company was reliable and honest. Although he could lose this money that he just transferred, at least he would know that the one that was in charge of the company wasn't someone that he could trust. Furthermore, just like how he would deal with Grace if she betrayed him, that was the exact same way that he was going to deal with Maxwell. Maxwell himself was astonished that Jack could invest such a huge amount of money on the first day that he took office as the president of the company. He wasn't the only one, as even Edwin on the other side had his eyes bulging from their sockets. Jack had transferred to him $4 billion the previous day. Now, he was giving out $1.1 billion as investment to improve the company. If the money was spent well, it was absolute that the value of the company would rise. Although the investment was only $1 billion, within a year or two, as long as the funds were used well, there would be no problem for the value of the company to rise by a few hundred million or maybe a whole billion. He now began wondering if he had named a lower price. Perhaps if he had named a higher price, Jack would definitely have given him without bargaining, right? Well, it was too late to regret now, as they had already signed the transfer agreement. Although the transfer was already completed, there were other legal procedures that had to be taken care of. After all, transferring a company wasn't just about signing a transfer agreement. You can use that money to improve every area that needs improvement. If there are a few people that are recruited, recruit more. And I would like you to be generous with the salaries. Starting from you, you'll have an increase of your salary by 20%. The others will have their own increase as well. If the money is not enough, please let me know in advance. Jack left almost the same instructions to Maxwell, just like how he had instructed Grace. After that, he left alongside Edwin to check out the other areas of the company. Although Jack had decided to increase the salaries of his employees, it wasn't just for nothing. He wanted them to be loyal to the company, and that was the exact reason as to why he increased their salaries. Although he knew that there would be the ungrateful ones that would still betray the company as long as there was a better opportunity, Jack wasn't worried that there would be no one to run the company for him. "Mr. Jack, now you're making me look bad." Edwin chuckled as he showed Jack around. "How did I do that?" Jack asked, as he didn't understand what Edwin was implying. "Well, you'll make them think that I wasn't generous enough. You have just taken over the company and you raised their salary." Edwin chuckled bitterly as he said these words. Jack finally understood what Edwin was trying to imply. Jack's actions were no different from telling the employees that he was better than their previous boss. But Jack didn't think that it was wrong. In any case, he was more generous than Edwin was. The two went to the training grounds and Jack looked at the training facilities. They weren't bad, but they were still far from being good enough. It seemed that he would have to invest a few more dollars to make the company reach the level that he thought of as the standard. By the time that they left the company, it was already afternoon, around 1 p.m. They went back to Cheetah Hotel to have their lunch. Just like before, Edwin paid for the meal. Although Jack could afford to pay for it, since Edwin insisted, he had to give him some face and let him foot the bill. Jack could somehow think that this was Edwin's way of proving to him that he was generous. Anyway, Jack cared nothing about that. At the end of the day, it won't affect him if Edwin was generous or not. So, he simply pretended not to know about it. Then, Edwin took Jack to the automobile store that was closer and had better cars. Although Jack wanted to keep a low profile, he didn't want the same incident as the one where his car was smashed by another. The reason for that conflict was obviously the parking space. Since Garpy had a better car, he thought that he was more qualified to use the parking space more than Jack. After looking around, Jack's eyes finally landed on a black McLaren P1. This McLaren gave the masculine vibe, and Jack liked it. So, he decided to buy it. "How much for that McLaren?" he asked the salesperson that was attending to him. "That car is worth $13,130,000. It has a maximum speed of dash," the salesperson replied. Jack nodded and interrupted the salesperson from giving the description. Currently, just the price was enough for his car not to be underestimated. So, there was no need for all the description and whatsoever. Just swipe the card to complete the payment. Furthermore, can you complete the procedures that are required? I want to drive it away when I leave the shop. The salesperson was speechless at Jack's way of doing things. All the same, he hurriedly took Jack's card lest he changed his mind. Just selling this car was going to get him commission worth more than $250,000. Jack completed the payment, bringing his balance to $4,009,870,000. Previously, he had left the extra $23 million for expenses. After about 30 minutes, Jack drove away the McLaren that now had a temporary plate. Edwin had left as soon as he brought Jack here as he had other things that he needed to take care of. Jack drove the McLaren back to Cheetah Hotel. He had to be prepared because from around 6 in the evening, there were the quarterfinals. Although he was only going to participate in the semifinals and finals, he had to arrive on time. Just thinking about what he was going to earn from winning the championship, Jack's mood was good. He even hummed a song that he didn't know about, just humming randomly, not caring if it was off tune or not. He got to the underground parking lot and found that his Mercedes-Benz E-Class had been taken away. There was no need to guess where it went as such a car wouldn't be allowed to occupy the parking lot. Currently, there were not many cars in the parking lot. So, he simply picked one and parked. He got out of the car and was just about to leave when he heard the sound of several roaring engines approaching. Just from the roars, he could tell that they were all sports cars. He was curious about these people. If they participated in racing, maybe he could join them and be able to make a few dollars from it, right? Jack didn't have to wait for long. As soon after he got out of his car, there was a convoy of sports cars that rushed into the parking lot. What made Jack frown was the fact that the drivers were driving the cars at a high speed, even though this was a parking lot. If there was an accident, he wondered what consequences would be. The cars were parked, and just like before, they occupied almost all the parking spaces that were free. Although it was already afternoon, there were still many guests in Cheetah Hotel. Not long after, the youths that Jack had met in the morning alighted from their cars in pairs, or in another case alone. Upon seeing that it was this group of youngsters, Jack wasn't in the mood to entertain them. He immediately turned around and walked towards the elevator. There was no need for him to stay with such an unreasonable bunch of people. One of them smashed his car while another one claimed to be his fiancée. If this group wasn't unreasonable, then what was? He was simply walking away when he heard someone shouting, "Hey Wendy, ain't that your fiancé over there?" The moment that this young man said these words, everyone cast their gazes on Jack, trying to scrutinize him well. The previous time, they had no time to look at him as they were either ready to beat him up, or they were too dazed by what they had heard to look at him. Although Jack was currently wearing a different casual pair of clothes, unlike the white suit, his figure still remained imprinted in their minds. Just from his back, they could recognize him. Wendy looked at Jack with a complex expression on her face. Angie looked at Jack, who was still walking away as if he didn't see them, and then Wendy, who was looking at him. She frowned. If the two were really engaged, why would the fiancé ignore his fiancée? Was there any argument between the two of them, or the two didn't like each other in the first place? She was just about to ask Wendy about it when someone else beat her to it. But it was just that the person that was being addressed was not Wendy, it was Jack. "Hello there. Aren't you going to allow us to apologize to you? Since you're Wendy's fiancé, you shouldn't treat us as strangers, right?" Collins shouted at Jack. Although he didn't like Jack, he had to do everything to know about Jack. When they went out, he had tried getting information about Jack from Wendy, but couldn't find anything. In the end, he had thought that it would be good if he could get Jack to join them. Then, he would pretend that he wanted to befriend him. After getting all the information that he could, he would then take action to make sure that the engagement between Jack and Wendy was annulled. That was a perfect plan. He used the words like Wendy's fiancé and apologizing to make Jack allow them to talk to him. Then, they would get acquainted before he befriends him. Well, those were all plans and dreams. But sometimes, not all plans and dreams were fulfilled in reality. There's no need for that. Jack's reply reached Colin's ears, making his expression to darken. This was the first time that he was inviting a person to join them. In the end, his invitation was turned down, and in front of so many people, that was a stain to his reputation in the group. Jack was surprised that they still thought that he was Wendy's fiancé. But, in reality, he wasn't. And Jack decided that if Wendy continued claiming that he was her fiancé, he surely would have to get back at her. At this moment, Jack thought that maybe Wendy was using him as a shield to block someone that was trying to pursue her. Although he didn't like it, he decided to turn a blind eye to that for now. "Jack, wait for a moment." Wendy's voice reached his ears, making his expression change suddenly as he halted his steps. He had thought that the other party didn't know him, and was just using him as a shield. Who knew that she actually knew his name? Or did the hotel give his information to her? As he thought of this, he frowned. This was a 5-star hotel, and he was sure that it wasn't something easy to give out the customer's information. But if one owned the place or had connections with the owner of the hotel, he could easily get his hands on that information. The moment that Wendy saw that Jack had stopped, she sighed in relief before hurrying towards him. Angie wanted to follow, but Wendy stopped her as she wanted to speak to Jack in private. When she got in front of Jack, she asked him to move a distance away from the group so that their chat would be private. "How do you know my name?" The moment that they had gained enough distance, Jack asked. He was straight to the point, and his expression was cold. Upon hearing Jack's question, Wendy's heart skipped a beat. As for his cold eyes that stared at her, they made her heart ache. This was the person that she had been engaged to, but the way that he was looking at her was no different to how one looked at a stranger. No, it seemed that he was dissatisfied with her for some reasons that she didn't know. "All the same," she replied, "I know you because you're my fiancé?" Wendy's reply was what she thought was according to logic. But in Jack's ears, it was someone forcing herself on him. She wanted him to be her fiancé, although he knew nothing about her. "Listen here, lady. I don't think you got the right person. As far as I know, I don't have a girlfriend, let alone a fiancé," Jack said plainly. Jack's words were like arrows that pierced through Wendy's heart. She looked at him and said, "I didn't get the wrong person at all. Aren't you Jackson Alfonso? Did you get my information from the hotel?" Jack frowned as he asked, "Not at all. I even know that you're from Crystal City. And 2 days ago, you were supposed to be in Inchoate City. As to why you're here in Venture City, I'm not sure about that." Wendy said, "Did you investigate me?" Jack's stance became a little aggressive. How could he allow others to simply look into his information and come to pretend to know him? Wendy took a step backwards when she saw that Jack seemed angry. She hurriedly shook her head and asked, "Were you not told that we were engaged 2 days ago?" This was something that Wendy wondered. It had already been 2 days since the two had gotten engaged with Dalton's permission. What she didn't know was the fact that Dalton had told Victor that Jack didn't agree to the engagement. And since they had already agreed that Jack was engaged to Wendy, they decided to keep this as a secret from Jack for the time being to make sure that he wouldn't destroy their plans. Then, during this time that Jack didn't know about what happened, they would look for ways to bring him back to the Alfonso mansion. After coaxing him, they would tell him about the engagement. Then, the deal would be completed as long as Jack had no disagreement to it. But they had never expected that the two of them would meet in a place that they had no idea about. They didn't know that Jack would go to Venture City, and neither did they expect that Wendy would be there. Told by who? Jack was confused. He then thought about the word 2 days ago. That was when he remembered that Dalton had come to pick him up. All of that was so that he could get engaged to someone. If he remembered correctly, he didn't agree to the engagement. Then why on earth was the lady in front of him claiming that they were engaged? He suddenly thought of how Dalton had expelled him from the family and how he had tried getting him back by force. So, it wasn't impossible for him to use some means to make sure that the engagement wasn't canceled as long as there were benefits. "Your father?" Wendy answered uncertainly. She couldn't understand if it was just that Jack was playing dumb or it was true that he had no idea about the engagement. When he heard that his father was supposed to tell him, he immediately connected to the fact that Dalton wouldn't give up in the face of benefits with small losses. He looked at Wendy and asked, "How did the engagement go through when I wasn't there?" Wendy replied honestly, "Your father said that you had left in Inchoate City and that we could just continue with the engagement. In the end, an agreement was made that we will get married when I am 21 years old." As she talked about marriage, she blushed. Jack confirmed that Dalton had certainly used a trick to make sure that the engagement went through. He took a deep breath and looked at the lady in front of him. He said, "You should give up on this engagement thing. I didn't agree to the engagement. Furthermore, I'm no longer a member of the Alfonso family." Jack's words made Wendy's heart skip a beat. She was cheated by Jack's father? And since when was Jack not a member of the Alfonso family? Just as she was dazed, Jack walked past her and headed for the elevator. It was only after a few moments that she reacted. "Wait, Jack." Jack halted for a moment and said, "You got the wrong person. I don't know you, and I'm not from the Alfonso family." Furthermore, I didn't agree to the engagement. So, I hope you can forget about what happened 2 days ago.